Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Christine Dacey, and I am lucky enough to be the CEO of the Churchill Trust of Australia. Simone Cassidy and I are going to run this information session for you and hopefully provide as much relevant information and as many tips and tricks as we can for you so that you can establish if you are keen to apply for the fellowship and all the things that might help you through that process. I would like to start by acknowledging that I am coming to you from the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people in the ACT, and we are very privileged to live, work, learn on those lands. And I would like to welcome all First Nations people who are attending this and acknowledge that you are all coming to me from the lands where you are. We will run this session by me doing a little bit of slides and chatting, and then Simone doing her story, and then you feeling free to ask us lots of questions in the Q&A box that you have available to you. I will just say to you, we do tend to answer a lot of the questions that you have as we go through our presentation, so you by all means put them in early if you want to, but I suspect we will cover off the most commonly asked ones by virtue of what we're doing. There is no dumb question, so ask away. Some people have been through the process before. For some people, this will be completely new. The other thing I would say to you is if you think of something after the session, don't worry. There are questions and answers on our Trust website. There are also some cute little animations that step you through the process stage by stage. We have quite a bit of information on our website. If you go to churchilltrust.com.au and there's a tab up the top called Become a Fellow, then there's an awful lot of information there. And we do ask people to self-serve because there's so much stuff there. But by all means, have your questions ready. I will just make a note that we are doing closed captioning on this session. And there's usually that kind of slight delay. So closed captioning is available to you. We will also put a link in that Q&A box to our FAQs so you can readily access it. And if you have questions, as I said, there are opportunities to ask me or the team once we get offline. And we post these sessions on our YouTube channel as well, because we know that not everyone can get to them, and we're running a number of these sessions. They're sort of grouped by theme, but a lot of the information's quite similar in each of them. So I will just tend to focus the questions on the ones that I think are most broadly applicable. If you have some very specific circumstances that you want to talk to us about, then by all means, let's chat to you offline about it. But what we find is it's most helpful for us to cover the really big ticket items as we get going for it. We will stop it at an hour because I know people have got lunches and lives to get to. But as I say, lots of opportunity for you to ask away. All right, so I'll start by just saying what is a Churchill Fellowship. And for us, we're named after Sir Winston Churchill, who was one of the great global leaders of the 20th century. And Churchill really believed in the power of individuals to make change. And so a fellowship program like we offer is really true to the spirit of Sir Winston. And we're really proud of that. We have a 60-year legacy of doing this, and we have supported nearly 5,000 fellows over that time. So we pick about 100 fellows a year, and we send you out into the world to do your voyage of discovery. For those of you who don't know, all of the money to pay for the fellowships came from everyday Australians who generously donated 60 years ago, and we've been really carefully managing that money ever since. And so everyday Australians are helping identify other everyday Australians to make big change for everyday Australians. So it's a really nice virtual circle. We think the fellowship is so much more than a grant. We think it's so much more than a trip overseas. We like to think of it as a really unique and life-changing learning opportunity. And when I say learning, that's not formal learning. We're very proud of the fact that you can come to us through any channel. You do not have to have an academic pathway. One of the core bits of our DNA is that anyone from any walk of life can apply to be a Churchill Fellow. So the learning is really in, the broadest concept of learning. It is not about doing a course. It is not about doing a chapter of your PhD. It's about, observing some things overseas, making some contacts overseas, identifying opportunities overseas, so that your learning is enhanced and that you can come back and make change. As I said, no academic qualifications required. This is about what you can do and about what your vision is and what contribution you want to make. I did say the travel overseas piece. I do get asked in these questions, does the travel have to be international? And I say, yes, it does. That is at the heart of our fellowship program. And if you want to do a big slice of domestic travel, then this mightn't be the right fellowship program for you. It is a minimum of 4 weeks and a maximum of 8 weeks overseas that the fellowship will fund. And that's about going offshore and learning and seeing and immersing yourself in new ways of doing things, in new opportunities that you can then incorporate into your learning and your vision and then bring back to Australia with you. If there are any people who are in very remote parts of Australia, we do have some scope in very narrow circumstances for a bit of Australian travel to, acknowledge the fact that we do have some incredibly remote areas. But for 99.9% of people, it's an international fellowship. I guess the last thing I would say, the fellowship doesn't stop when you finish your travel. You become part of an incredible alumni who are doing just incredible things across the country. I like to call them the quiet achievers. There are people making change in their communities all day, every day, as well as, some whose names you would absolutely recognize. The alumni piece is really, really important. Okay, what do you need to know in terms of applying for a fellowship? So the fellowships are open to anyone who is an Australian citizen or permanent resident who is 18 years or older. There is no upper age limit. We can provide support for people who have got very particular requirements. That might be in terms of special needs that they have, disabilities, or whatever set of circumstances. But essentially, and again, for 99.9% of you, it's an individual project that you will be doing on your own that will flow through our normal fellowship program guidelines. If you do have special needs, by all means, reach out and we can talk to you about what supports we can put in place. The individual nature of the project is, again, a core part of it. The one exception is that we have joint applications for First Nations projects where a First Nations person might work with another Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, or they might work with a non-Indigenous person on a topic so it's the same topic for 2 people. So that's that joint fellowship. Again, very small numbers, but it is available to you. I will also tell you that we have a number of sponsored fellowships. When you're doing your application, the application form will prompt you to identify any sponsored fellowships that you might think are relevant. I just say to people, go and have a look at our sponsorship page, but please don't worry about it. We actually do all the matching in the background of sponsored fellowships to good projects and people. So if you see one that looks like a good fit, absolutely mark it down, but do not worry yourself that you're either putting the wrong one in or the right one in. It won't rule you in and it won't rule you out. So that's the key thing to know about sponsorships. Tips and tricks for applying. We get about 1,000 applications a year, and I always say to people, this is not your time to be a shrinking violet and ridiculously modest, because it's a really competitive process. And the things that you need to have firmly in your mind are, why is your project important now? Who's it going to help, and how is it going to help them? And we talk about benefits to the Australian community, and community is howsoever you define that. It might be your local football club, it might be the state of Queensland, it might be the whole of Australia. So it's really important for you to be quite clear about who you want to benefit and how you want to benefit. Another tip and a trick I will tell you is that writing in and saying this will help me get my PhD does not make the most compelling application. We are very proud and protective of our fellowships, and they can't just be an add-on to something else that you're already doing. They can absolutely be in line with things that you're already doing, but the fellowship has to stand on its own merits because the panel will be looking for that. You also need to be really clear about what makes you the right person to deliver on this idea. I can be extremely passionate about giving webinars, but it's about what's the point? It's the so what at the end of that. And what is my ability to do something with what I'm going to learn overseas, right? So what's the need for the project? Who's it going to help? Why are you the right person? And then I will just talk to you briefly about the itinerary, because you are asked to put in an indicative itinerary as part of your application. And I always tell people to apply the 70-30 rule. And I know Simone's going to have some interesting, she had a pretty interesting itinerary. So we know that if you're applying in April or, 2026, and you're not traveling till July or September the following year, like, things change. What I say is, think about where you want to go, why you want to go there, what's your rationale, who are the sorts of people. Some people have a very clear idea of who they're going to meet, some people have a less clear idea. But what you can't do is tell me that you're going to New Zealand, Fiji, the Marshall Islands, and Hawaii, and then turn around and go, oh, actually, now I'm going to Namibia and South Africa and Kenya, right? The panel is going to see and assess you based on that itinerary, and they're going to ask you questions about why you want to go there, who you're going to meet, what's the sorts of stuff you want to do. So that 70-30 rule is a good one just to have in the back of your mind. Some key dates for you are, the round is going to open at 9 a.m. on the 27th of February, and it's going to close at 5 o'clock on the 30th of April. If you are applying, you will be required to have your referees done 2 days before that 30 April. And although you don't believe me, we're actually doing it to help you. We find that people get very stressed out about getting their references done. And so we require you to have them 2 days beforehand, so that actually that last 48 hours is free for you to be really focused on what you're writing in terms of your applications. Referees are really interesting. We tend to get a lot of questions about referees. And I might let Simone talk about how she identified hers, and then we can answer any further questions that you have. But the short answer is you need 2 of them. Shortlisted applicants are interviewed in May and July. I will encourage you to go onto our website and look at those interview dates. You will be interviewed in the state capital where you live. And if you don't live there, we will talk to you about how that happens. The larger states have a 2-interview process. So New South Wales and Victoria, there'll be 2 interviews. Everyone else, there'll be 1. The final interview has to be in person. So if you can't make those dates, then this is not your year. And the reason we do this is because the whole ethos of our program is human being to human being interaction. You could do a whole fellowship by just Zooming to people overseas. We place a real value on being able to interact with you as a person. And so those final interviews are mandatorily in person. Similarly, should you be selected, we bring you to Canberra and do a big induction session, and those dates are also mandatory in person for the reasons that I just set out for you. We are spending an awful lot of money on these fellowships, and we are committed to preparing people, selecting the best people, and then preparing people as best we can. So if you can't make those dates, then 2026 is not your year. We had a few people last year who couldn't come to onboarding, and we just had to say, unfortunately, you can't do your fellowship. We can't put it off a year. We can't move the interview dates. We have selection panels who have all made themselves available on those dates. So please go and have a look at those dates. We do announce the successful fellows in September. Then you have from November this year till the end of January 2028 to do your travel. So we give you a really good 15-month period. And the team here will work really closely with you on, sorting out your itinerary when it happens, etc. I will just quickly get out in front and answer some of the most common questions, which is how much is a fellowship worth? And in 2025, the average was $37,900. And our fellows reported that they felt that amount of money was sufficient for what they need. And that money covers your airfares, your travel. We give you a living allowance and other costs that you specify in your application. Another tip for you, if you put in, I'm going to 5 conferences, they do not make the most compelling applications that we get. So, you really have to have thought about what you're doing and why you're doing what you have, and you have to be quite comprehensive in your application, because that is how we cost out the value of the fellowships. So those are kind of some of my key tips. The other one is that the character limit in the application is enough to send you around the bend. Simone's laughing, so I'll let her talk some more about that, and the video pitch. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to hand you over to a real live fellow, Simone. And when she's told you kind of her story, then she and I are really happy to take questions and answers from everyone. Hi, Simone.
Hello, thank you, Christine. It's such a nostalgic trip actually hearing you speak all about the application process, because I remember a few years ago I was, joining one of these sessions as an audience member. So it's nice to be on the other end of that and talking about the application process for me. Before I go into what that experience was like, it might help if I share just a little, very brief bit about what I was doing at the time that I applied, because I think that provides a bit of context for my own application journey. When I applied, I was working in state government as an education advisor, and I specifically were supporting children and young people who arrive in Victoria as refugees and who without their parents, so unaccompanied humanitarian minors. And given that everyone here today has an education background, I'm sure it would be no surprise to hear that those young people are very vulnerable in the education sector and require support and advocacy to thrive. I had a great employer, the Refugee Minor Program, very willing to provide training, resourcing for me as I needed it. And along that journey of doing that work, I was in that role for nearly 8 years. What really stood out for me was that diversity and inclusion support in our education system is quite siloed. We have support for refugee learners. We have support for people with a trauma history. There is support related to neurodiversity, accommodations and support for learning difficulties, but that these supports are very siloed. And the children that I was supporting, if indeed their needs were intersecting, our referral processes, assessment processes, funding processes they really struggled to understand a child with complex intersecting needs. So the director where I was working probably heard me complain one too many times, I can't get training on this topic. I want training that helps me work in an intersectional way. Where are the resources for me? Why isn't anyone else in Australia talking about this topic? And she said to me, this sounds like a Churchill Fellowship. I think you should apply. And I hadn't heard about the fellowships until the director, shared with me about them. But I think she really set me up well and helped me to answer those 2 questions that I think, every fellowship applicant needs to be able to answer, which is, do you have an area of interest or passion where you feel there's potential that a shift could actually benefit the Australian community somehow. And she knew that I had that passion and that I was really wanting to benefit a particular cohort of learners, refugee background learners. And then the other question, of course, is, do you really need to go overseas in order to obtain the knowledge and the resources that you're looking for? And my director certainly knew that I tried very hard to find the support I needed here in Australia and was not able to access what I wanted. So she helped me sort of answer those questions already. And I think it's really important that everybody can answer those questions for themselves when they apply. And then, of course, it's down to the application process. And in all honesty, I applied in 2023 and I was not successful. I didn't make it to the first interview round. And looking back, I have a pretty solid theory around what I did very differently the second time around in 2024, where I was ultimately successful. So perhaps by sharing a little bit about what I changed might help some of you to avoid the sorts of mistakes and challenges that I faced during my first application round. I think the first challenge that I had was that I worried immensely that my topic was too niche. I worried that, I'm passionate about supporting refugee background learners. I'm interested in neurodivergence, but surely the intersection of those two things is too niche. So against my own better judgment, I broadened my topic, thinking if I can demonstrate that my topic's applicable to a huge section of the community, it's going to be more appealing, is what I mistakenly thought. But I think in doing so, I broadened my topic to such a degree, it probably became hard to see what I was trying to find out about. And I think I inadvertently pitched a proposal that looked probably very similar to other projects that had already been funded through Churchill Fellowships. So my strong advice to you all is to jump on the Trust website and to look. You can do a search via field, look at the education fellowships that have already been funded, have a look and see what has already been reported on and researched, to make sure that you're actually putting forth an idea where you're delineating from something that might otherwise seem similar. Maybe you've got a great new idea, but you need to be able to communicate that you're bringing something new to the space. But I also think it's very affirming to look at past fellowships to really see what Christine and I are saying, which is there's no singular type of area of research that's going to be funded. There's no singular type of person who is successful. And by looking at those past fellowship reports, you can really see how diverse it is out there, which I think is very reassuring. And that leads me to, I guess, the other huge change that I made from application 1 to application 2, which was, how do I put this? I think I mistakenly thought that to be the right kind of person. I know, Christine, you have the question up there on your slide, what makes you the right person? And I think I thought that I needed to be very academic, sound very professional. I needed to quote a lot of research, include a lot of statistics. And of course, an evidence base behind you is definitely important. But I think I lent too hard into that approach, which might be okay if you are indeed a researcher, but I am not. And the second time round, I had to really rethink my approach and back myself and think, why am I the right person? It's not because of any research that I've done. That's not my background. It's actually because of the practice wisdom that I've been able to gather over the years through the work that I've done. It's the understanding that I've gleaned from working alongside children and young people who share their stories with me. It's what I've learned working across schools, right across the sector, primary, secondary, government, Catholic, kinder, all the way through to TAFE. That's a huge diversity of experience. Why aren't I talking about that? So I think I would encourage you to try not to wed yourself to the idea that there's one kind of way to demonstrate your passion and that you're the right person, and to think about your own personal strengths. For you, that might even be a lived experience. Please don't discount that, and talk about through your application why it is that you are well placed to actually further this work, what it is you've already understood, and how you're well placed to continue the work, I think is really important. And certainly I tried to do that in my second video, which I found challenging. Christine already alluded to the tight word limits and the tight time you have available. I think it's 1 minute flat, isn't it? 60 seconds for the video. And I found that really challenging. Look, I'm not someone who's on TikTok or social media like that. So for me, that was a real stretch. But the application process was a good stretch because it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I think that sets you off quite well for a Churchill Fellowship, where the name of the game really is to be out of your comfort zone. So I think my strongest advice would be, rather than twisting yourself in knots thinking, what do the trust want? The trust want to understand who you are and really speak to that, and you'll have a much more compelling project.
Yeah, I think we hear that and actually see it a lot. People who come thinking this is what the trust is looking for. Actually, the only thing the trust is looking for is to understand you and would you be a good fellow? And can I just say that the pain around writing your application tightly and doing your video, which I'm actually reliably informed is 58 seconds, not 60, and the 2 seconds really hurts, is about preparing you to be able to deliver your message really succinctly, one, at interview, and two, with stakeholders. And so, although it feels very painful and unnecessary at the time, it's actually part of that preparation phase. And I'm also told that it's not a word limit, it's a character limit. So every full stop, every
Yes.
comma, every space is like gold. So do you practice? We've got a sample application up on the website, so you can go and have a look at it. It's not long and it's not a thesis. We don't want it to be a thesis. So, yeah, there's so many stories I hear from fellows about the joy of doing that. Um, I saw someone asking a question about, can I take someone with me on the fellowship? Can I just say, the trust is reasonably agnostic about it, but a couple of things to really think about. Anyone who travels with you is at your cost. I talked about how immersive and human being to human being this process was meant to be. If you have someone with you, that will by definition change the way your fellowship unfurls. So any of that ad hoc, spontaneous, oh, I can get you another meeting, or could you come to dinner, is really changed and really frankly reduced. Now, for some people, I've heard them say, this is the greatest thing I'm ever going to get to do, and I get to be selfish and I'm going to do this, versus I couldn't travel without having someone there with me. Everyone's life circumstances are really different. But I did get a question the other day saying, oh, well, both my husband and I are going to apply and we're going to take our children with us. And I was just like, how are you going to do your fellowship? So again, it goes back to, what are you trying to get out of it? And, how much might you miss out on if you have other things going on? I don't know, Simone, can you talk to that at all, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got two young, primary school aged children who I hadn't been away from for very long at all. I think 2 nights was the most I'd ever been away from my youngest. And I was away for 6 weeks in the UK. So, other side of the world. For me, it was the right decision to go on my own for all the reasons, Christine, that you've just outlined. And it was such a privilege to every day be immersed in my absolute area of passion with other people who have the same passion, and just to dive into that area of interest without having to think about other people's needs. Perhaps not everyone's in the position that I'm in. I have a husband at home who also travels a lot overseas for work. So he was very keen to return the favor. I've certainly been at home with kids on my own. And then at the end of my fellowship, at the end of those 6 weeks, my husband brought the children over, and we funded some travel ourselves at the end of that fellowship. For me, that was the perfect balance. And my kids, rather than feeling sad because mum was away, just kept looking forward to that holiday we were going to have together. And my experience was that all the sort of logistical side of things were really well supported by the trust in terms of how you make that work with flights and family coming in and what have you. I was so pleasantly surprised by how manageable that was and how much support there was to do that. So for me, it all played out very well. And I know of other fellows in my same cohort who we were all a bit worried about how we'd go being away from, dependents. And we all had a really good experience. So everyone's different, but that's certainly my experience.
Yeah, that model where they tend to meet you at the end, I think is the one that we see that most people opt for. And also I'm just really conscious that not everyone can afford to,
Of
one, take
course.
them with
Yeah.
them. So, everyone's life circumstances are just completely different. I just saw a question pop up saying, can we break the travel? And the answer is no, it has to be one trip. And that's about us managing the costs, having people come backwards and forwards. We have a budget that we work to, and so it's one trip, and our team will work with you. I will just say too, on the itinerary, people tend to get really excited and really enthusiastic and just cram, 70, it becomes like, it looks like a Kontiki tour. And what we say is, this is hard going. It's really intense. It's kind of the best and worst thing, at the same time. And what we don't want you to do is be completely exhausted. We want you to have time to reflect, to think, to, download, to write your notes up. And like, if you are somewhere fabulous in the world, if you are in New York, go walk through Central Park and go look at the Statue of Liberty. I kind of encourage people to think about it like a normal working week, kind of 5 days on, 2 days off, give yourself enough periods of respite, give yourself some time so that those ad hoc meetings, you've at least got some chance of doing some of them. Um, we also talk a lot with fellows about how they capture their notes on the road. Simone, did you have any kind of, words of wisdom about that sort of stuff? Because people come back and they've got a notebook full of scribble, and then they're just like, how am I going to turn this into a report?
Yeah, I think the Victorian 2024 kind of cohort of fellows, we had a very strong WhatsApp group where we shared with each other. So people that went early on during the period of travel allowed would help other people. We all shared different tips and tricks for that. And what I did was to make great use of AI, and I strongly encourage people to consider this. So I was able to use a platform that allowed me to voice record interviews, of course, with all the right permissions in place, but an AI tool that doesn't share the recorded information with any third parties. It's a privately used platform, but allows you then to search through your notes. So all my notes, if you like, were up in the cloud. I didn't have to worry about losing a notebook or losing a file. And I could use AI to say, who spoke about dyslexia for multilingual learners? And AI would say, this person on this day, here's their quote, this person on this day, and give me a summary. So there are incredible tools out there now that you can use. And what I found was so much support from my fellows, if you like, to share with each other all these kinds of tools. It becomes its own learning experience, really, even how you might go about this sort of thing.
And we're fine with people using AI, but when you come to interview, AI can't do the interview for you,
Oh,
right?
definitely
If you
not.
get AI to write your application, I reckon it'll have no chance of being shortlisted. You can use it to help you,
Yeah.
but what it does not is give us any sense of you, and
Yeah.
that's what we're about. I can see there's a question there about if I don't have enough leave from work, and this applies, some people are self-employed, right? What we are not is a wage replacement. I need to be very clear with you about that. We provide a living allowance, but that will not cover your wages. So you might need to have a conversation with your employer. You might, if you are self-employed, you might need to think about what arrangements can I put in place. And the answer might be that this year's not your year, right? All of those are really legitimate things that people have to juggle in their own lives. So, it's pretty, it's really up to individuals. I just saw a question come through. Any pros and cons in having foreign recommendations versus local ones? I cannot be clear enough. This is about benefit to the Australian community. So there might be benefits overseas, but that is not going to be the most compelling part of your thing. You've got to be focused on Australia. Simone, they asked, which AI tool did you use?
I used a tool called Rev, R-E-V, and it does have some cost, but to me that was important because I wanted to make sure if I'm interviewing people that their information that they're sharing is private. So I think if you do use AI for recording, yeah, be very mindful of the ethics involved and do your research. But tick the boxes for me. But yeah, as Christine said, AI was great for that record keeping and helping me to find my way through the notes. It's not going to write your report for you. But that said, the trust has really flexible options for how the report can look. So at this early stage, if you're thinking about applying, don't let the idea of a report put you off, because there are really flexible ways that report can be delivered, again, depending on your own strengths and how you like to communicate. For me, it was challenging, but again, I feel so proud of that report when I see it there and think, wow, what a stretch it's been for me to produce that. It's been its own positive learning curve.
I completely support you there. Like, the last thing we want to do is for people to self-select out thinking, I can't write a report, I'm not an academic. We will work with you. We want to know where you went, who you spoke to, what are the things that you learned, and what are your recommendations, right? It's that simple. There are length limits. We do not want PhDs. We've had people do podcasts. We've had people do coffee table books. There's all sorts of ways for you to do that. I can also see a question out there about, do you need agreement from people and organisations that you're hoping to meet? I think that goes to my 70-30 rule. For some of you, you'll know exactly who you want to meet, you know, where they are, and then for others, it'll be a little kind of less clear, and you'll still be reaching out and making contacts, and sometimes it even happens in country. Again, it's that 70-30 rule. The panel has to have enough confidence that you know where you're going, who you want to talk to, why you want to talk to them, and that you've got some chance of talking to them, rather than just like, oh, we'll see how it goes, or I'm going to go to a conference and, you know, network my way to a fellowship, because it's a really competitive process. And I think I also saw a question come through saying how many people get shortlisted for interview. Roughly about 20%, and then we choose the 10%. So we usually do about 1,000 applications a year, interview 200, and then announce 100. So those are kind of the stats. I'm just reading your questions as they come in as well. So
I can see one question about whether or not a more impactful application has greater reach in terms of numbers and geography. And I think I did allude a little bit to that question when I talked about my first application, the one that was not successful. I think at the time, overly fixated on the idea that it has to be seen to be in support of a broad array of people. It has to have, you know, broad appeal. And I would say that's not necessarily the case. The Churchill Fellowships the Trust are quite willing to fund projects that they don't have to be about the numbers and how many people are going to benefit. And in fact, I think I focused more the second time around on making the argument that if we can support the most vulnerable learners, even if they're a minority, that's going to have flow-on benefits for everybody. So I wouldn't get overly caught up on the idea that the positive impacts need to be for a majority, because in fact there's so much injustice and inequity that needs addressing, and that's invariably for minority groups. So that's my feeling about that one.
There's a couple in here. Would my trip to one country be looked at more favorably than multiple countries? No, we're completely agnostic. It's about the logic and rationale about where you want to go and why you want to go there. There's another one asking me about the 70-30 rule. It's actually not a rule, right? It's me trying to be helpful to you. There is no rule. There is no 70-30 rule. It is not written down anywhere. It is me saying to you, have a think about, if you are applying in a very competitive round, if you just write in saying, oh, I think I'd like to go here, that is not going to be compelling. The more detailed you can be and the more reasons that you can provide, I think the stronger your application will be. And so I always say to people, work on about a 70-30 rule. There is no rule. It is your application. You can do whatever you like. So I just had a question about someone who was saying, I live in New South Wales, but the project would benefit the ACT. Just put your application in. We sort through all of that stuff in the background. And I don't know if there's been a question in here about, oh, it might be education, it might be considered health, it might be considered, you know, the arts. Just put your application in. we do all that sifting and sorting in the background. So don't get hung up on that. We will take care of all that back end stuff for you. Um, right, I'm looking at other questions.
See that some people have asked about, whether it's about location or institution and service.
Yep.
And I would say that, I certainly felt like the 70-30 rule absolutely did apply. I know, again, it's not a rule, but as a guidelines, maybe we should say, certainly worked in my own experience, in that I was focusing on the different services. So there was a particular peak body and advocacy organization that I really, really wanted to meet with. And it was more about them rather than the location. And I didn't really know where they were based until I reached out to them, of course. And then there were certain academics who are, leaders in their field that I wanted to meet with. I thought that one person was in Bath because that's where the university they were publishing from. By the time I reached out to them, they had moved to Oxford University. It wasn't a problem for the trust for me to reach out and say, I'd asked to go to Bath, but now I'd like to go to Oxford because that academic is now in a different location. So no matter how detailed and thorough you might be, things will be different once you reach out. And in my experience, the trust is very understanding of that and very flexible. So you just need to do the best you can to identify the relevant players, knowing that as you move further along in the process, things will probably change a little bit. And I found there was a lot of flexibility to adjust as I needed to.
Yeah. I can see a question in there about what if it could really be done online with Zoom. And, I just go back to the travel and the immersion and the human being to human being is actually right at the DNA of our fellowship. If this is not for you, then perhaps this is not the fellowship for you. That is something that we hold really firm to. Someone's asking about doing technical research and peer reviewing it and then adding to it. I think we'd need to talk offline with you to kind of understand what that looks like. I think someone also asked about who's on the panels, what sort of prior knowledge do you need, what sort of prior knowledge. The panels are multidisciplinary panels. We have experts, really, we have just incredible people all over the country who donate their time. So should you get through to final interview, there will be potentially a lawyer, a baker, a candlestick maker. It varies from state to state. And part of your challenge is to talk to non-experts and make them understand what you're about, what the project's about, and what change you're trying to bring to Australia. So don't assume prior knowledge. There'll absolutely be some, but we don't sit there and have technical panels. In the larger states, the first interview will be through a more technically focused panel, but the last panel is definitely and deliberately cross-disciplinary. I think someone's saying, is there going to be a recording? Yes, there is. Go to our YouTube channel. The two-step process is only in the larger states, Victoria and New South Wales. The other states we manage by and large with one. I feel like we're just racing against the questions and answers here. References, Simone. I guess we tried talking people through it. I think the key thing is that they know who you are. They can speak to your integrity and commitment and capability.
Yeah, I felt quite lucky that the second time that I applied, I had so of course you all have two references. One reference was there's a mentor, the director that I'd mentioned had encouraged me to apply in the first place. And she was right behind me from the get-go, so very keen to be a reference. And I really struggled to think through who the second one should be. The first time that I applied, I had someone who has a lot of experience working in sort of government policy areas. Like they're a very what can I say? They're a very experienced person themselves, but I don't think they could speak to my work well enough and to me as a person and how I operate. So the second time around, I changed that second reference to someone who used to supervise me when I was working at a school and has remained a friend. And I realized that person now as a friend can speak to the kind of volunteering work that I do, the sort of passion that I have, as well as being an experienced educator themselves. They understand the sector and they understand what's happening on the ground here. So if you're lucky enough to find someone who can speak to multiple different kind of aspects of the work, I think go with that person. It's not about that person having their own incredibly impressive CV. That's not really what it's about. It's about how well they know you and perhaps can speak to your capacity, because it's such a multifaceted, multi-layered experience. You've really got to be so committed to do it. It's been a life-changing and wonderful experience, but it really requires a lot of commitment. So if you have someone who can speak to that passion and your willingness and ability to commit, I think that's that makes for a great referee, more so than them having their own sort of accolades, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, the referees, and the way it works is you can identify a couple of people maybe, and you can send them the link and they fill in the form, and then that form comes back to you, and you can choose the two that you think are your strongest. And I'm reliably informed that when you put your application in, you have to hit submit, otherwise it's not complete. And so I think that referee stuff like that will make sure there's a really good Q&A to make sure that you've actually hit the submit button, because at 5 o'clock last year the phones were going off like crazy with people saying I haven't got a confirmation of it. So yeah. um Oh, I saw a question and now it's gone away that I thought we could have an interesting conversation about. Oh, yeah, Simone, we were talking before we came on about like what's commitment this really is from people, from kind of when they might show up at an info session today to, the whole thing. It's much more than the 4 to 8 weeks, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been challenging in ways I didn't expect, rewarding in ways I didn't expect. It's been one of the best things I've ever done, but also a lot. What can I say? I think it would be a mistake to think the application process, oh, it's such a big piece of work. It's actually time wise, to be honest, it's really not, partly because of how tight the character limits are. So you can't write a thesis even if you wanted to. That's a good thing. But it is quite a lot of work to actually get the fellowship up and off the ground in terms of having that itinerary finalized, reaching out to people. I've honestly loved it, but I do think you need to think through, I guess, what your commitments are like in your life at the moment. Is this going to be something that your current employer will support you doing? I was really lucky to have that support. They saw the benefit of me doing this learning and bringing it back into their space as well. But that may not be everyone's situation. Do you have supportive family? Are you going to be able to take the time that you need to enjoy the process, I think? So everyone's circumstances are different, but it's really, I think, important to think through, when will you be able to do that, reaching out, the planning, when will you be able to do the report writing? I was able to take study leave from my employer for that, for a part of that. But really thinking through where you'll find the hours, because it's so worthwhile to do, but it's not the kind of thing you want to be able to enjoy it. I think it is really enjoyable, but it's not going to be enjoyable if you don't have the time to give it.
I guess the other thing, Simone, just briefly, that we were again chatting about just before we came online was think really hard about where you are personally prepared to go in the world. The world's a tricky, complicated place. We traditionally have had lots of fellows going through, say, America. We want people to be comfortable. So if you put places in your itinerary and then turn around and say, oh, I'm not comfortable, and I get it, like big things change, right? But so I'm just trying to say, think about where your personal attitude towards risk and uncertainty will allow you to travel safely and comfortably. I think it's an important thing.
Yep.
Can a referee be a family member? I think that we would find that very difficult, to tell you the truth. I think that that's very hard for them to appear objective. Are we allowed to reach out with questions after this session if we watch it back? Yes. I would also encourage you to watch some of the other sessions if you want to. A lot of that, and as I said in the beginning, go to the Q&As on the website, right? We're a little organization. We do ask fellows to kind of self-service to the extent that they can. There is a lot of information there. And so, please go and do your own due diligence and research. And I think one of the questions that I saw was, are there mentors? We normally tell people to get in touch with their local Churchill Fellow Association in their state and territory. They're really fantastic people. And on our website, churchilltrust.com.au, down the bottom, there are links to all of the relevant Churchill Fellow Associations. And, I think that they would be really delighted to talk you through any aspects of it. Now we've got 9 minutes to go. This is usually where I get the 5-minute warning and then 1,000 questions come flooding in, but I see that we've answered nearly 55 already. So I feel like we're going like great guns. I'm going to do a last call. I feel like we're in a notch. Oh, wait, there, that's what happens. We have answered the 70-30 one about 5 times. So I'm trying to be helpful and I feel like I'm just confusing people. It's about the level of detail we expect you to have when you apply for your itinerary. It's your itinerary, you have as much detail as you want, but the best ones have enough to be credible and understood and explained to the panel. And I think that's about 70% done with a bit of flexibility around the 30%. What else we got? Don't worry about the category. We will do that sifting and sorting in the background for you. If war and terrible events break out, can your trip be postponed or rescheduled? We would work with you on that if there was really a global event. But if it's about your personal attitude towards risk, we ask you to have considered that when you're putting your itinerary together. Okay. There's a question there about whether your lived experience will make you more or less attractive applicant. I think we would have to understand. I think people have to bring their true selves. I think that's the only way you can really make the panel understand why you are the best person and why you would be a good Churchill Fellow. Are more unsuitable less traveled destinations regarded unfavorably? Not really. I mean, we go by the DFAT travel advice, the travel advisory, so we're not letting anyone go to North Korea or Ukraine. But and in some cases, we've had to negotiate with people about where our insurance will cover you for. So, but the DFAT Smart Traveller is a pretty good guide, really. Are we able to contact local associations? Yes, that was the Churchill Fellowship Associations that I was just talking about. If you go on to our website, there's a way. I'm never saying 70-30 ever again. So all I'm saying is your itinerary has to have enough detail that you can explain it to the panel in a sensible way. In my experience, that means that you have to have about 70% of the details sorted out. That's all it means. I'm never saying 70-30 ever again. I feel like I've made it more confusing, not less. Simone, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you'd known at the start of the process?
I wish I'd understood the extent to which it would really open doors for me. That's what I was told when I applied by my work mentor. But I did not expect it to open doors in the way that it has. And I'm only in the early days of being post-travel. My report only came out in November, and I am a very busy woman this year with workshops and speaking engagements and meetings. It's a wonderful thing. And I had been told that, but I still doubted there'd be enough interest in my particular topic. So if you're wondering if your topic's too niche or too small, are you the right person? All I can say is that there really is an impact to having done a Churchill Fellowship. People know about the fellowship. It means a lot to a lot of people. And even being able to introduce your work with that alone, I have found it does open doors. And I didn't understand the extent to which that would be true. So I'm glad I had the chance to tell that to you all, because it really has been so much more impactful than I had anticipated.
goodness, the questions really do keep coming. Okay. Could the travel be about community immersions and arranging visits? Yes, people structure their itinerary based on what their topic is and who the people they want to meet is and what's appropriate for that study. So, yes, you can hire a car. You can catch a train, catch a bus. We don't like you hitchhiking. That's very bad.
Someone asked about my topic. You can look me up on the Trust website. Simone Cassidy, my report is there. Have a look. I would be delighted.
And I think there's a question in there about not fulfilling the report. I will say to you that it is the one thing we ask you to do in terms of acquitting a nearly $40,000 investment in you. We take that really seriously. So taking the money and doing the travel and then not doing the report back, we consider to be a fundamental breach of being a fellow. Okay, I think we've exhausted you, or your fingers have gone to sleep. And the report needs to be targeted to the people you want reading it, right? Like each report is based on who you are trying to influence, who you are trying to explain what happened. So you'll know much better who your reports target at. Okay. Oh, no, can I do a report as a written doc and a video? Yes, you can. With some communities, polite to bring some food or souvenirs. Yes, that's at your own expense. Very small things. You won't have room in your bag. It's not the expectation, but I think, again, everyone just makes their own choices. Okay. We are 3 minutes early and you can, oh, no. Is that a favorable option? No, I think conferences are not a strong way to ground your fellowship application. Everyone can say, I can go to a conference and network. There might be one in there, and that's fine. But it really, really is not going to be the thing that makes for a compelling argument. So I'm not saying don't put them in. I'm just telling you that what I have seen makes panels really react positively to the application. Every time I say, I think we're done, 3 questions pop up. No, there are no samples of successful applications. There's a dummy application on the website just to help you understand kind of the line and length. Okay, I'm getting a few thanks very much. That's been interesting and useful. Simone, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And
thank you.
Good luck, everyone. And look us up on the YouTube channel if you want to know more. Okay, thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.